So with this week's video, guys, I'm gonna kind of direct this towards kind of the backyard grower, or a grower with a small area. This is my 150 patch. First time I'm doing 150 patch. What 150 patch is, it's 150 square feet of usable patch space. So you can see the stakes here. There's another one over there, and it goes and makes a square. So it measures out at 12 feet 3 inches, which gives me roughly 150 square feet. So 12 foot 3 inches long by 12 foot 3 inches deep. I'm gonna plant it in a diamond pattern. So right now I have the 2195 Thiel. Another good thing about this is that you can obviously see this one was smaller than my other plants. Jeff sent me a seed. Was in some need of kind of getting some pollinations done with some different genetics, and I really liked his genetics that he did last year. So I'm gonna probably use this to pollinate at least 2 or 3 of my plants, and this is a perfect opportunity to kind of show what you can do in a small space if you give it, you know, relatively decent care. This particular plant has been in the ground for roughly 10 days. No grow lights. What I did is I did my paper towel method of germination. After it germinated, after about 3 days, the root popped. I brought it straight out into a pot, into the hoop houses from the other plants. And once it popped out of the soil in the pot, that was approximately another 3 days later, 2 to 3 days later, and it showed the cot leaves. I put it right into the soil. So once I knew what direction that first true leaf was going is when I put it in, because if I just did it with the cot leaves, I could plant it and it could be growing the wrong way. And since I'm near the edge of my patch, it had been a pain in the butt to try and get it go back the way I wanted to. So you do need to know which direction that first true leaf is going. Usually one side of the true leaf, when it first pops out, one side's kind of flat and the other side kind of curves. The curved side is going to be the open side of the leaf, so that means it's going to fall towards the flat side, and your direction the vine's going to travel is going to go the opposite direction. So you can see the first true leaf is open towards me, which means I'm running this plant towards that corner. I'll probably pollinate as close to about 10 feet as I can. That way I have enough room for the pumpkin. I'm going to pollinate anything that pops up as far as fruit go. And then, like I said, I'm going to train my vines in a diamond pattern, which means my first probably 3 secondaries are going to be relatively short. Then the middle secondaries are going to be longer. And then the last secondaries, I'll show you a little bit later in the season how I plan to do those. But usually later in the season, your first secondaries usually have issues, or they're, you know, you cut them off, or something's going on with them. At least down here in the south. So they're not as necessary. It's kind of just like a little bit of a rooting zone here. It'll get them going. The middle secondary stay healthy for longer in the season. And then again, I'll show you what I'm going to do with the later secondaries when we get to that point. But I figured this would be a good little series, especially for people who don't have 1,200 square feet to do a giant pumpkin. You can definitely see what it takes to grow them, but you can also see that anybody with a reasonable amount of garden space can grow a giant pumpkin, have a nice little jack-o'-lantern. Don't know what I'm going to get this one up to. You know, it'd be nice to get a 1,000-pounder in this small of a space, but again, that takes quite a bit of care, and I don't know if I'm going to go, you know, all in on that much on it. We'll just kind of see how the plant goes and how the fruit goes, and see if it's worth the effort to try and push for those extra pounds. But definitely take care of it. Definitely want to see what it does as far as a fruit size, shape, how heavy it goes to chart, things like that. But I figured this would be a nice little series to add to the Pumpkin Wars. So what I'm going to show you here is I got some marigolds I like to plant by the base of my plants. There's a couple different reasons why. Do some research on them, but it's just marigolds are good for you know, resistance of pests and other things. So just something I like to do. May or may not do anything, but nice to add little flowers close to the plants if they don't bother them. And if it could be a positive anyway, it's a good thing. But I didn't want to do this part just to show you the marigolds. I want to show you why it's important to check your soil moisture level. I watered these plants yesterday evening. It's around 11 o'clock the next day. Top of the soil, you can see a coloration here around the plant. Again, coloration around the plant. And just by looking at that, right, moisture levels you'd think are good. A little bit more drier as you go out. I did water this area, but most of the water was focused around the base of the plant. But you want them roots to stretch out. So, you know, in digging for these marigolds, you can check the moisture level. Just clump up a little bit. It does have some moisture content to it, but it's not as moist as I would like, especially in the heat of the day. I want that to be a little bit more moist than this. Let's just say your moisture content, if you want 100% moisture for your soil as far as like a peak level, now you don't want it 100% wet, you want your moisture level to be at 100%. Right now I would say I'm about 50% of where I want to be. So if that makes sense, let's just say you want 50% air, 50% water, and I'm 25% moist, okay, if that makes sense. So that's not the true ratios, but it kind of gives you an idea. I'm about half of what I want to be right now. There's no water coming out, which is good, but the soil is barely cool or moist to the touch. It does have some discoloration, but it's only because there's a you know, reasonable moisture content, but not exactly where these plants are at peak or optimal levels. So you have to dig in the soil to do that. If you want to do sensors and all that other stuff, that's great. If you have the money, the time, or enough of them to do it, awesome. But in my opinion, being able to understand how your soil reacts to nutrients and water and rainfall, and you know how it permeates through the soil, this is the best way to do it. So I did that next to those plants. I'll do one here. And are you going to break roots? Possibly, maybe, probably, especially later in the season. I don't see any white roots popping up here. Moisture level is slightly better. I can feel it. It's a little cooler, a little bit more damp. So this side isn't too bad. Lets me know that I'm probably watering pretty decent over here. Now this is about, I would say 14, 16 inches from the plant. So it's not bad. I would say it's 80% of where I want it to be. But we're in the heat of the day, so I want to make sure that my moisture content is as close to 100% of peak optimal moisture for the soil. Again, that is not 100% moisture in the soil, but where I feel optimal is. And you want to maintain those levels. Yeah, you want some dry spells here and there so that the roots do stretch out, but it's important to know. So just in this span, right, 20, 24 inches, I've got different moisture contents. So you can't just assume because I watered here or I watered there that it's good. You have to get your hand in the soil. You have to check different areas of your patch and see how the water is permeating in those particular areas.